I'm sorry, Linda.
This business trip is absolutely necessary, Michael said apologetically as he looked at her swollen belly. The setting sun streamed through the large living room window, softly illuminating her worried expression. Their new home, decorated with wedding photos and baby items, reflected the anticipation of the new life they were about to begin together. It's okay. This is your important project, not mine. The baby and I are fine, so don't worry, Linda replied with a gentle laugh. After 7 years as a pediatric nurse at Kaiser Permanente Medical Center, she had assisted in many births. She knew her pregnancy was stable. Last week, her doctor had assured her that everything was progressing well, but she still couldn't help feeling anxious about her husband's absence, especially being only 2 weeks away from giving birth. Thinking about her mother-in-law, Barbara, and sister-in-law, Kathleen, only increased her unease. Even at last Sunday's brunch, their cold attitude hadn't changed. Mom said she'll call if anything happens, Michael commented. Linda replied with a weak smile. Yeah, Barbara said that. But Linda could sense the sarcasm behind her words. If you had married the woman I chose, we wouldn't have to worry like this. Barbara's preferred choice had always been the daughter of a fellow professor, a Stanford graduate who was now a successful lawyer. Every time she was compared to her, Linda felt her heart shrink. After 3 years of marriage, Barbara had never accepted her. To her, Linda was just a simple nurse no matter how successful she was in her career. And Kathleen, well, her possessiveness over her brother didn't help their relationship. It never improved, and when Barbara lost her husband 3 years ago, her attachment to Michael intensified. Since Linda became pregnant, their treatment of her had only grown colder and more distant. Even at the 4th of July celebrations, the tension remained, with no signs of improvement. Kathleen had deliberately pushed Linda to the limit by taking family photos. Later, when they were posted on social media, Linda had been completely cropped out of the images. Why? Kathleen had said indifferently, "You haven't had children before. It's risky getting pregnant at your age. A simple nurse who will now be a housewife. You just live off my brother's salary." Her mother-in-law and sister-in-law threw comments at her casually during neighborhood association meetings. There were even rumors that Linda might ruin Michael's chance for a promotion. Linda had considered checking into the hospital early, but when Barbara contemptuously commented that she was being pampered too much, she dismissed the idea. "Don't hesitate to call if you need anything. With this heat, I tend to stay up late anyway," Mary, her neighbor, had told her after finishing her gardening at dusk. Mary, a former police officer now dedicated to writing mystery novels, had been worried about Linda's pregnancy from the beginning. After more than 30 years on the force, her sharp instinct didn't miss the tension between Linda and her in-laws. "Linda, I'll give you some advice from my days on the police force. Maybe you should install a recording app on your cell phone, just in case this isn't just paranoia. I've seen a lot of family tragedies in my time on the force." Although she hesitated slightly, Linda ended up following Mary's advice. As she downloaded the app on her iPhone, she felt the weight of reality. She needed to take precautions. A feeling of resignation came over her. Her relationship with her in-laws had reached the point of no return. That night, a sharp pain woke her. The dim light of the bedside lamp illuminated her pale face. She touched the sheets and felt them warm and wet. With the light from her cell phone, she saw red stains spreading. "But there are still 10 days until my due date." 7 years as a nurse were enough for her to understand it immediately. Premature rupture of membranes. The bleeding was heavy. If not treated quickly, it could be dangerous for both her and the baby. With trembling hands, she grabbed her cell phone. Mary's words echoed in her mind. Just in case. She opened the app and started recording. Michael should be at his hotel in New York, preparing for his important presentation. She dialed his number, but the call went straight to voicemail. "Barbara's house is right here." With difficulty, she forced herself to stand. Blood seeped through her nightgown, but she didn't have time to worry about that. Clutching her cell phone, she stumbled down the stairs. The few meters to her mother-in-law's house felt eternal. Upon arrival, the 30-year-old colonial building loomed under the moonlight. The doorbell camera automatically recorded her presence. "Mom! Kathleen! Please wake up!" she exclaimed, desperately pressing the intercom and banging on the door. The sound broke the silence of the night. Lights on the second floor came on, and seconds later hurried footsteps were heard descending the stairs. The door flew open. "What the hell are you doing here at this hour?" Barbara snapped. She was wearing an elegant silk nightgown. Behind Barbara, Kathleen held her phone in her hand. "Mom, please call an ambulance." "The baby," Linda pleaded weakly. "My God, you're being so dramatic," Barbara replied with her usual coldness. "Look at you all worked up. You're exaggerating. There's no need to go to the hospital. Aren't you a nurse? You should know what your condition is." At those words, Kathleen smirked and raised her phone. "That's right. You can't handle childbirth on your own. After all, you're a nurse." The flash went off, capturing Linda's anguished expression. If the night had gone as they had planned, that photo would have ended up on social media. "Please call an ambulance," Linda murmured, her consciousness beginning to fade. A cold sweat ran down her back and her vision blurred. Still, the recording on her cell phone continued. "That's enough," Barbara snapped. "You could ruin my son's chance of promotion. Do you have any idea how important this project is?" Her voice became increasingly distant. Kathleen's mocking laughter overlapped her words. Linda's legs gave way, and she fell to her knees. Her hot cheek touched the cold marble of the entryway. Consciousness faded. A white ceiling. The smell of disinfectant. The constant beeping of heart monitors. As she regained consciousness, Linda immediately recognized the familiar hospital environment. These surroundings were nothing new to her. Around her, the medical equipment of the intensive care unit silently monitored her recovery. "I'm glad you're awake," a nurse said kindly from beside her bed. Beside her, a uniformed police officer watched silently. Near the window, someone else smiled with relief. Outside, the bright California sun filled the room with light. The clock read 1 p.m. 12 hours had passed since the incident. For bags dripped silently, and the monitors displayed stable vital signs. "The baby?" Linda asked, desperately trying to sit up. The nurse raised her hand to stop her. "Easy," she said gently. The sudden movement almost dislodged her epidural needle. "Don't worry. We had to do an emergency C-section, but everything went well." Linda felt the air return to her lungs. "It's a girl. She's under observation in the NICU, but her condition is stable. Her APGAR score is good. And for a premature baby, she's surprisingly healthy." Large tears rolled down Linda's cheeks. Hearing those words, her C-section wound ached, but it was proof that her baby was safe. Her heart rate increased slightly, which triggered a small alarm on the monitor. "Mrs. Linda," a firm voice said. A police officer stepped forward. It was Detective Johnson of the Santa Clara County Police Department. On her chest shone a badge displaying 30 years of distinguished service. "If you can speak, I'd like to confirm the events of last night. Please don't strain yourself. Your postoperative rest is crucial." Linda nodded slightly. The nurse raised the head of her bed and offered her a glass of water with ice. The cold liquid soothed her dry throat after surgery. "Actually, we found crucial evidence on your phone," the detective continued, carefully choosing her words. "The analysis from the technical investigation team just arrived." On the desk was a transparent evidence bag containing her iPhone. "The recording captured everything," Johnson said. "What your mother-in-law and sister-in-law said. Your pleas for help." Linda felt her stomach clench. It lasted 1 hour and 12 minutes. The sound analysis confirms there are no signs of editing or manipulation. The detective paused and sighed deeply. Even with 30 years of experience, the cruelty of this case seemed to affect her. Among the officers who attended the scene, the impact has been enormous. "If we hadn't received the alert in time, this could have ended much worse," she added seriously. "The doctors say that both you and your baby were in critical danger. Your temperature was rising, and your blood pressure reached dangerous levels." Linda closed her eyes tightly. She had been so close. Too close. At that moment, hurried footsteps were heard in the hallway. The heavy door opened, and someone else entered. A new detective handed a medical report to Detective Johnson. It bore the letterhead of the Department of Obstetrics at Kaiser Permanente Medical Center. Dr. Watson, Chief of Obstetrics, approached to explain the contents of the report. A surgical cap peeked out of the pocket of his white coat, evidence of the recent emergency operation. It's inconceivable not to have called an ambulance in this situation, he said seriously, especially since Linda is an experienced nurse. She made the correct professional decision but was prevented from acting accordingly. This is clearly criminal behavior. Detective Johnson reviewed the documents. On the desk were photos of the scene, lists, and notes organizing the facts. When the paramedics arrived, Johnson continued, Barbara Wilson and Kathleen Wilson acted as if nothing had happened. They pretended to be asleep. A tense silence fell over the room. But the infrared images from the security camera show they were definitely awake. The air in the hospital room seemed to freeze for a moment. Only the heart monitor continued its regular beeping. But now the truth was clear. The recordings told it all. They completely ignored her pleas for help. They even mocked her suffering. The district attorney's office considers this a clear case of criminal negligence. The detective took out a tablet and showed the waveform of the recording. The pattern was unmistakable. The story of that night was there, clear and unmanipulated. The audio analysis confirmed there was no editing. This will be taken as conclusive evidence, the detective said. The prosecution believes there is enough evidence to proceed with the indictment. But then something even more shocking came to light. There was another piece of evidence. We found more evidence on Kathleen's phone, the detective continued. There are photos of you in the midst of your suffering, and there were attempts to post them on social media. Linda shivered. She even had a draft comment ready, the detective added, reading the screen. A simple nurse making such a fuss. Linda's hands trembled as she clutched the hospital sheets tightly. Her tears fell silently, soaking the white fabric. Barbara Wilson and Kathleen Wilson have been arrested, the detective announced. They are charged with criminal negligence, complicity in assault. Suddenly, there was a commotion in the hallway. Where is my wife? Where is Linda? It was Michael. He burst into the room, his face pale with worry. He had taken an emergency flight from New York. He was still wearing his suit, but his tie was loose, and his expression showed the exhaustion of a sleepless night. Linda tried to smile weakly. Michael, the baby, we're both okay. Michael rushed to her side and took her hand tightly. He still held the USB drive from his presentation in his other hand. Mr. Michael, Detective Johnson said gravely, your mother and sister are being questioned at the station right now. From the small speaker in the room, the recording from that night began to play. Michael froze, his face turning even paler as he listened to Linda's desperate pleas, and then the mocking laughter of his mother and sister. The sound of his wife's ragged breathing as she lost consciousness. Michael felt his hands tremble. He had received a notification from the police at JFK Airport. He rushed to the hospital, having slept through the entire flight, but he didn't know the whole truth until now. Detective Johnson's voice pulled him out of his thoughts. We have their sworn statements and their confessions. Everything has been meticulously recorded in the interrogation room. Silence filled the room. But the truth could no longer be hidden. Linda took my son away from me, Kathleen had said coldly. I couldn't bear the thought of his love being further divided with the baby. We just wanted to teach her a lesson. She paused and lowered her gaze. I wanted my brother's love just for me. We took advantage of his business trip. We planned it all. At that moment, a NICU nurse entered the room. The baby's fever has gone down. The father can visit her too. Michael hesitated for a moment, then gently took Linda's hand. Let's go see her together. Our daughter is waiting for us. He carefully pushed Linda's wheelchair to the NICU. In the hallway, Mary was still there. She had watched over them all night. Inside the incubator, their little daughter slept peacefully. Despite being only 24 hours old, she had a strong, determined expression. So small yet so brave. Linda gently touched the incubator. Michael, standing beside her, broke the silence. I'm sorry. If I had realized sooner. Linda squeezed his hand tenderly. It's not your fault, she whispered. But we need to make changes now. Michael let out a deep sigh. Just a few hours earlier, he had been offered a promotion in Silicon Valley, but his decision was already made. I'm going to request a transfer to the Seattle branch. Linda looked at him surprised. But your career, Michael. He held her gaze steadily. Nothing is more important than you and our daughter. His voice held a determination that Linda had never heard before. My indulgence with my mother and sister led us to this. It's my responsibility. I won't make the same mistake again. The baby inside the incubator moved her tiny hand. Michael and Linda looked at each other and smiled. I've already spoken with my supervisor in Seattle, he continued. They have a new project starting there. Linda's eyes shone. A new life in a new city. It was the opportunity she had secretly dreamed of. Starting over and working as a nurse somewhere else, far from everything that had hurt them. Michael took a breath and said seriously, about the trial against Mom and Kathleen. I'm not going to drop the charges. Linda nodded decisively. It's not just our problem anymore. Their eyes met, and for the first time in a long time, there was mutual understanding. Let the law do its work, she added firmly. Michael nodded slowly. Although the decision was difficult, they knew it was the right thing to do. And for the first time in a long time, they felt they were moving forward together. The feelings were still there. Protecting his beloved wife and little daughter was now his top priority. 1 year later, in the summer, a 3-story White House stood in a quiet Seattle neighborhood. Colorful flowers bloomed in the garden, and a cream-colored swing swayed gently in the breeze. It was lunchtime when Linda called her 1-year-old daughter. Emily took a few unsteady steps but ran towards her mother. Linda watched her daughter grow so healthy, despite being born prematurely. She felt a deep love for her. Dad will be home early today, Linda told her as she watched Emily play. The kitchen was filled with the aroma of hot soup and a fresh salad from Whole Foods on the table. Thanks to her experience as a nurse, Linda always prepared healthy meals for her daughter. Michael was enjoying his days as a project leader at the Seattle branch. His professional worries had greatly improved. His skills were highly valued in his new environment, and his salary had increased. When he arrived home at 5 p.m., Michael entered with a smile. Such an early return would have been unthinkable in Silicon Valley. As he picked up his daughter, his expression no longer showed the exhaustion of before. Oh, we got an email from Mary. Linda showed him her phone screen. The trial is over. Your new life shines even brighter. The trial of Barbara and Kathleen was over. Barbara received a 2-year prison sentence for negligence resulting in injury. The defense's request for a suspended sentence was denied, and the judge issued a stern verdict, stating that they failed to help a pregnant woman in crisis, which is very serious. Kathleen received a suspended sentence, but the social consequences were harsher than expected. Due to the reaction on social media and the total loss of credibility in the real estate industry, she had to delete her accounts and decided to sell the family home. Mom and Kathleen are moving, Michael said quietly as he held his daughter. Their house in San Jose was already on the market. They're moving to Dallas, Texas. His in-laws decided to leave California altogether. They realized that their isolation from the community was more serious than they thought. We made the right decision, right? Linda said. Michael nodded firmly. Yes, absolutely. His gaze turned to Emily, who was playing in the garden, chasing soap bubbles and laughing with joy. You know what, Linda? She began timidly. I received a part-time job offer at Seattle Children's Hospital. Michael's face lit up. That's wonderful. Emily is growing, and it's great to have a place where your experience can be valuable. Unlike his mother, who had dismissed Linda as a simple nurse, Michael had always respected his wife's career. They said I could start with 3 days a week, and that they would even help me with childcare at the hospital. The couple smiled at each other. Their new life continued to take shape steadily. We should tell Mary too, Linda said. The former police officer and neighbor remained an important presence in their lives, even after the move. She always sent Linda her new mystery novels as soon as they were published. Oh, and there's a neighborhood party next weekend. Their new home was surrounded by very friendly neighbors. On weekends, families enjoyed barbecues in their yards. There were many young couples with children Emily's age, and their social circle gradually expanded. As night fell, the soft light characteristic of Seattle illuminated the swing in the garden. Emily was already asleep, and the tranquil melody of a music box floated from the children's room on the second floor. Linda stepped out onto the terrace, and Michael offered her a cup of coffee. Thanks to you, we've come this far, he said. It's thanks to Mary and your strength. From there, they could see the sunset over Puget Sound. Like gentle waves, new days would arrive calmly for this family, bringing with them waves of hope that would gradually heal the dark memories of the past.